I used to believe that silence was safer, that if I stayed small, I would be loved. But silence does not protect you. It only hides you. One day I heard them laugh behind my back. They said I was too old to start something new, too soft, too slow, too late. They did not know I was listening. They did not know I was breaking, and they had no idea what would rise from that silence. This is not just a story about social media. This is a story about trust, betrayal, courage, and how I found a voice I never knew I had. Before we jump back in, tell us where you are tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe. Because tomorrow, I have saved something truly special just for you. My name is Rachel. I am 46 years old. I live in a small town where most people know each other by name. The kind of place where the streets feel quiet and everyone seems to have a routine. I wake up every morning at 6:30. I boil the kettle, feed the cat, and make 2 slices of toast. One with peanut butter, one with strawberry jam. I sit at the kitchen table and look out of the window while the sky turns from gray to soft blue. My husband, David, leaves for work at 7:30. He works in real estate. He wears the same navy blue suit every Monday. Our daughter, Emily, is 22. She moved out last year to study in the city. Sometimes she calls me on Sundays. Sometimes she forgets. The house feels quieter now. There are moments when I walk into a room and forget what I came for. Not because I am old, but because there is no one else here to remind me. I keep busy. I work part-time at a bookstore. I cook dinner every night. I listen to the radio while I fold laundry. People say I am kind. People say I always smile, but they do not see the silence in my chest. They do not know how heavy it can feel to be invisible. I am not unhappy. But sometimes I wonder, is this it? Is this all life has planned for me? Last week, my sister Claire visited. She is younger than me by 8 years. She wore a bright green jacket and laughed so loudly that it made the walls feel wider. She told me all about her latest trip, her new friends, and something called a social media following. I nodded and smiled, but I felt like she was speaking another language. "You really should get online, Rachel," she said, sipping her coffee. "People love real stories, real people. You could talk about books or life or anything, really." I laughed. "What would I even say?" I asked. She shrugged. "You are real. That is more than enough." Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. David was already asleep, but my mind was awake. I kept hearing her voice. "You are real. That is more than enough." I did not know it yet, but something small had already started to move inside me. A whisper, a thought, a seed. A part of me that I had long forgotten, and maybe, just maybe, this story begins there. The next morning, everything looked the same. The sky was pale. The cat stretched by the radiator. David drank his coffee while reading the news on his tablet. But something felt different. It was not the way the toast burned slightly. It was not the way the floor creaked under my feet. It was something inside me, like a tiny thread pulling at the corner of my thoughts. After David left for work, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea. I opened my laptop. It was something I rarely used, except for the occasional email or online recipe. But that morning, I typed "how to start social media" into the search bar. I did not even know what I was looking for. All I knew was that my sister's voice was still echoing in my head. She had said it so casually, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. But to me, it felt like standing in front of a locked door with no key. I clicked on a few articles. Find your voice. Share your story. Be authentic. I frowned. What does that even mean? How can you share your story when you are not even sure what your story is? I closed the laptop. My hands felt cold. Later that day, I went to the bookstore. It was a quiet shift. Only a few customers came in. An older woman asked for a book on grief. A teenage boy asked where the graphic novels were. I helped them both. I smiled, as I always do, but my mind was elsewhere. When I got home, David was watching the news. We ate dinner in silence like we often did. He seemed tired. I did not ask why. He did not ask about my day. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen and checked my phone. There were no new messages. Just a few photos on a family group chat. Claire had posted another picture from her trip. She was smiling, standing in front of a mountain, holding a coffee cup. I looked at it for a long time. Then, without really thinking, I opened a new account. Just a username. No photo, no posts, nothing else. I did not even know why I did it. I closed the app. I told myself it was silly, that I would probably delete it in the morning. But when I lay down in bed, I felt something I could not explain. Not fear, not excitement. It was more like curiosity, a gentle tapping on a door I had kept shut for years. I could feel something changing. And for the first time in a long time, I was not sure if I wanted to stop it. The following days felt like walking through fog. Everything around me looked the same, but I could not see clearly. There was something stirring in me, but I did not understand it. I kept checking the account I had created. It still had no picture, no posts, no name, even. Just a blank space. A quiet, empty room waiting to be filled. I stared at it every morning after David left for work, and every time I closed it again. I told myself it was pointless, that I was wasting time. But I kept going back, and that confused me. Why did I care? Why did I feel this strange tug in my chest? What was I even hoping to find? At the bookstore, I caught myself watching people differently. I noticed how a young woman took a photo of her coffee next to a book. She smiled, adjusted the angle, then posted it on her phone with a quick swipe. It seemed so natural for her, like breathing. For me, it felt like another language. One I was too late to learn. That evening, I asked David if he had ever thought about starting something new. He looked up from his newspaper. Like what? He asked. I do not know. Something different. Something creative. He shrugged. Not really. I am happy with things as they are. I nodded, but I did not feel heard. I wanted to say more, but the words got caught in my throat. I wondered if I was being selfish, for wanting something more when nothing was wrong. Later, I looked at old photos on my phone. Pictures of Emily when she was small. Pictures of David and me on holidays from long ago. And then I found one of myself, standing in front of the old bookstore before I started working there. I was smiling, holding a book against my chest. I looked nervous, but proud. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without thinking too much, I posted it to the account. No caption, no filter, no hashtags. Just the photo. Just me. My heart beat a little faster. I turned off the phone and walked away. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself no one would see it. But the truth was, I felt exposed. And underneath all of that, I felt confused. What was I doing? Why did it matter? And why did I feel like something had just begun, even if I did not understand it yet? The next morning, I found a notification on my phone. One person had liked the photo. Just one. It was from an account with a soft pink profile picture. The username was Words from Clara. I almost laughed. It felt so small. But then I felt something else, something quiet and warm. Someone had seen me. Later that day, while folding laundry, I opened the app again. Clara had posted a short video. She was about my age, maybe older. She sat on a couch with a blanket around her shoulders, holding a cup of tea. Her voice was gentle. She said, "Some days I feel invisible, like I could disappear, and no one would notice. But then I remind myself, I am still here. I still matter." I watched the video twice. Then I followed her. Later that afternoon, I received a message. Clara. Hi, Rachel. Your photo made me smile. I started posting a few months ago. I was scared too. But you are not alone. If you ever want to talk, I am here. I stared at the message for a long time. Should I reply? Was it silly? Could I really trust a stranger online? But something about her message felt kind, not forced, not fake. So I wrote back. Me. Thank you, Clara. I am new to all of this. I do not know what I am doing. But your words meant a lot. She responded quickly. Clara, none of us really know what we are doing. We just show up, day by day. That is enough. That evening, I told David that I had spoken to someone online. He raised his eyebrows. A woman? He asked. Yes. She seems nice. He looked unconvinced. Be careful, Rachel. People online are not always who they say they are. I nodded, but I felt a small sting in my chest. He was probably right. But part of me wanted to believe that this was different. For the first time in a long time, someone saw me. Not just as a wife or a mother or a woman over 40. Just me. Clara and I started exchanging short messages in the evenings. We talked about books, about tea, about how quiet the house feels when the children are gone. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that someone out there understood, even if she was just a voice behind a screen. She felt real. And maybe, just maybe, she was the first person in a long time who truly listened. It had been 2 weeks since I posted my first photo. Since then, I had shared 3 more. A picture of my favorite book. A photo of the sky outside my kitchen window. And one of my hand holding a teacup with the caption, "Sometimes silence is not peace. It is just waiting." Each one received a few likes, a few comments. Not many, but more than I expected. And Clara always left a kind word. You write with feeling. This made me feel seen. I understand this more than I can explain. Her words gave me courage. I started thinking about things differently. I found myself noticing the light through the curtains, the way the steam rose from my tea. Little moments felt bigger, more beautiful. but not everyone was so kind. One evening, I was sitting in the living room when my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Emily, are you on social media now? I felt my stomach tighten. I replied, yes, just trying something new. A moment later, Mom, no offense, but why? People your age always get weird online. Please do not post anything. Embarrassing. My heart dropped. I stared at the message, feeling small, feeling foolish. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I just wrote, do not worry. I am just exploring. She did not reply. The next day, I mentioned the message to Clara. She said, people fear what they do not understand. Sometimes when you start changing, it makes others uncomfortable. I wanted to believe her, but Emily's words stayed with me. People your age always get weird. Was that how she saw me? As someone old and out of place? Later that night, Claire called. She had seen one of my posts. You are doing this social media thing now? She asked, half laughing. Yes, I said softly. Just trying. She paused. Okay, well, just be careful, Rachel. The internet can be cruel. People are not always kind, especially to women like us. There it was again. A warning, not shouted, but whispered through worry. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was stepping into something I did not understand, but something inside me resisted. Because for the first time in a long time, I was not just watching other people live. I was beginning to feel like I could take up space too. Still, that night as I lay in bed, I heard the warning again in my mind. Be careful. People are not always kind, and I could not help but wonder. Was I ready for what might come next? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, watching the steam curl into the air. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were not. Emily's message, Claire's voice, their warnings played over and over in my head. I picked up my phone, opened the app, looked at my profile. Still simple, still small, just a few photos, a few soft words, a handful of kind comments. Nothing dangerous, nothing dramatic. But I heard their voices again. People your age get weird. Be careful. I closed the app and placed the phone face down. Told myself it did not matter. I told myself it was just a hobby. Nothing serious. But deep down, I knew I was lying. Because something inside me had already started to shift. Later, I was working at the bookstore when a young woman came in. She wore a long coat and held a notebook in her hands. Do you have any poetry by Mary Oliver? She asked. I smiled. Yes. One moment. I led her to the poetry shelf. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books. I love her words, she said. They are quiet but powerful. I nodded. I understood that. As she paid for the book, she looked at me kindly. You seem like someone who loves words too. Her voice stayed with me long after she left. I thought about the words I had been writing in my posts, the tiny pieces of truth I had shared. Later that night, I posted again, a photo of a shadow across the floor. The caption said, Sometimes I say things here that I cannot say out loud. Thank you for listening. I did not tell Emily. I did not tell Claire. I tried to ignore their warnings. I tried to quiet the noise in my mind. I told myself I was doing nothing wrong, that I could stop anytime I wanted. But when I lay down to sleep, I kept thinking of that young woman in the bookstore. Quiet but powerful. Was it possible to be both? And if it was, why had I waited so long to try? David came home later than usual that night. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and walked straight to the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, scrolling through my messages. He glanced at me, then at the phone in my hand. "What are you always doing on that thing lately?" he asked. I looked up, startled. His tone was not harsh, but it was not warm either. "Just reading," I said quietly. "Sometimes writing." He opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. "You never used to care about any of that. Social media and all. What changed?" I did not know how to answer. I thought about Clara. I thought about the kind strangers who left little hearts on my words. I thought about how I had started to feel real again. But I just said, "I am trying something new." He stood there for a moment watching me, and in that moment, something changed in the way he looked at me. It was not anger. It was not concern. It was something I could not name, like confusion mixed with distance. He nodded slowly, then walked away. We ate dinner with the television on. He barely spoke. Afterward, I cleaned the kitchen alone. I wiped the counter, washed the dishes, put everything in its place. But something inside me was out of place. His look had stayed with me, a quiet question that never got asked. Later that night, I stood in the bathroom brushing my hair. He passed behind me, paused at the door. "You are different lately," he said. I turned to look at him in the mirror. "Different how?" He shrugged. "Just distracted." He walked away before I could respond. I looked at my reflection. I tried to see what he saw. Was I different? I did not feel like a stranger, but I also did not feel like the same woman who used to wait quietly for life to move around her. Something had shifted. And maybe he saw it too, even if he could not name it, even if he did not understand. It was in the way he looked at me now, like I was holding something he could not reach. And for the first time, I did not know if I wanted to give it back. The silence between David and me grew longer each day. Not angry silence, not loud or sharp, just quiet, empty. We spoke about groceries, about the weather, about bills and appointments. But we did not speak about me. He never asked how I felt. And I never said what I needed to say. Until one evening, when the silence felt heavier than usual, I could not hold it anymore. We were sitting on the couch. The television was on, but neither of us was watching. The blue light flickered across his face. He looked tired, distant. I turned to him. "David," I said, softly but clearly. "I need to ask you something." He looked at me surprised. "What is it?" I hesitated. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. "Do you think I am wasting my time with what I have been doing lately? The writing, the photos, the messages." He looked away, rubbed his hand across his chin. "I do not know," he said. "I guess I just do not understand it." I waited. "That is not really an answer," I said gently. He sighed. It just feels strange. You are not the kind of person who does things like this. I felt something tighten in my chest. What kind of person do you think I am? He looked at me again, more closely this time. You are steady. You keep things simple. You do not need attention or all that online stuff. His words landed like soft stones. Not cruel, but heavy. I looked down at my hands. What if I do need something different now? What if I need to be seen, not just as someone who keeps things steady, but as someone who still feels alive inside? He said nothing. The silence stretched. Finally he said, I just do not want you to get hurt. There it was again. The warning. Not loud, but wrapped in fear. I nodded. I know. But this is not about danger, David. It is about truth. My truth. He did not respond. He stood up and walked into the kitchen. I sat alone, staring at the shadows on the wall. My eyes filled with tears, not because of what he said, but because of what he could not say. He could not see that I was changing. And that maybe I had already changed. I asked him the truth, and in his silence I found my answer. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of tension. David and I moved through the house like two people who shared the same space, but not the same thoughts. We spoke less and less, and when we did, it was about the things that did not matter, the weather, the groceries, the things that were safe and simple. But inside, I could not stop thinking about my words, thinking about his silence, thinking about Clara and the words she had shared with me, thinking about the small moments where I had felt truly seen. I woke up earlier than usual the next day, before David. I made my tea and sat by the window, watching the first light of morning spill over the garden. I had not posted anything in a few days, but my phone was never far away. I opened the app again, and then I read the messages. Clara's words. The other messages I had received from people who had read my posts and felt something. I sat with the phone in my hands, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to close it, to shut it out, to forget about it all. But another part of me, that part wanted to write. It wanted to share. It wanted to be heard. So I wrote. I wrote about what it felt like to be invisible, to feel like I was slowly fading into the background of my own life. I wrote about the small but real ache of wanting to be more than just fine. I wrote about how I had spent so many years being the person everyone needed me to be. And now, I was learning to be the person I needed to be. When I finished, I hesitated for a long time. Should I post it? Should I send it out into the world? Thought about David's face when I had asked him the truth. I thought about the way he had looked at me, like I was a stranger he could not understand. I thought about the quiet distance between us. And then, I thought about Clara, about the people who had found my words. And for the first time, I realized something important. It was not about being understood by everyone. It was about being true to myself, even if no one else saw it right away. I pressed post. The words left me, and in that moment, I felt lighter, a little scared, a little exposed, but also free. I put my phone down and looked out the window again, letting the sun warm my face. Maybe things would never be the same between David and Me. Maybe the changes I had started would take me somewhere I could not predict. But in that moment, I felt a small spark of hope, because even if no one else saw it, I had finally seen myself. The days that followed my post were quiet. I didn't expect much. I didn't expect anything at all. But as the hours passed, I found myself checking my phone more often than I should have. Each time, I felt a small jolt of hope. Would anyone comment? Would anyone say something kind? Would anyone see me the way I wanted to be seen? The notifications came slowly. 1 or 2 likes, a few words of encouragement, but nothing like the flood of attention I feared or hoped for. Still, the small moments kept me going. I replied to a message from Clara. She said, "You are not alone. I feel this too." It wasn't much, but it was enough. The truth was, I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone really saw me, since someone really heard me. Not as a mother or a wife, but as Rachel. Just Rachel. I sat in the quiet of the evening, holding my phone in my hand, when David came into the room. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the question in his eyes, but he didn't ask it. Instead, he sat down on the couch, sighing deeply. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He gave me a tired smile. "It was fine," he said, his voice distant. I've been thinking." I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Thinking about what?" He looked down at his hands. "I don't know. I guess I've been thinking about us. About this whole thing." I felt my breath catch in my chest. Here it was, the conversation I had been afraid of. He continued, looking at me with uncertainty in his eyes. "I know you're changing, Rachel. I see it. And I don't know what to do with it." I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him, feeling a sharp ache in my chest. This wasn't the way I had wanted it to be. This wasn't how I had imagined this new part of me unfolding. But in that moment, I realized something. His uncertainty wasn't my fault. His discomfort wasn't something I had created. It was just the way it was. "I've been changing too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And it's not easy for me either." There was a long silence between us. I could feel the space widening. A gap that wasn't just about social media or my posts. It was about something deeper, something we had stopped talking about a long time ago. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him everything, about how I felt invisible in my own life, about how I was so tired of being the person everyone else expected me to be. But I didn't. I stayed still, the pain of the silence settling in my chest like a heavy stone. I looked down at my phone again, the small words from Clara still glowing on the screen. "You are not alone." For a moment, I closed my eyes, and in that quiet, I let the pain settle inside of me. The pain of wanting to be seen, but not knowing how to make others see me. The pain of realizing that sometimes change hurts, even when it is the change we need the most. The silence between David and me stretched for days. I could feel it like a thick fog that refused to lift, no matter how much I tried to move through it. He had stopped asking me about my posts. I had stopped trying to explain. But deep inside, I was restless. I needed an answer. I needed to know if he could see me again, if he could see the woman I was becoming, if he could accept this change. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking my tea, and staring at the empty chair across from me. When I finally made the decision, I would not wait for him to come to me. I could not keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to ask the question that had been eating at me. When he came home, I did not wait. I did not try to be careful with my words. I just spoke. "David," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I need to know something." He looked up from his jacket, surprised. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it?" he asked, his voice soft. "Are you afraid of what I am becoming?" I asked, my words more direct than I intended. "Are you afraid of the woman I am trying to be?" He looked at me, his expression unreadable. For a long time he said nothing. Then, slowly, he sat down across from me, his gaze never leaving mine. "I am not afraid," he said quietly. "I just do not understand. I do not know where this is taking us." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Where are we, David? Because I feel like I am standing here, trying to move forward, and you are stuck somewhere behind me. I need to know if you are with me, if you are willing to see me, to see this version of me." He hesitated, the silence between us deep and heavy. "I want to understand, Rachel," he said finally. "I really do. But I feel like I am losing you in this new version of you. Like I am losing the person I thought I knew." I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "I am still here," I said softly. "But I cannot wait for you to catch up. I cannot keep pretending that everything is fine when I am changing, and I need you to see it, to accept it, to see me." There it was, the question I had been avoiding, the truth I had been hiding from. I could no longer keep it inside. "I need an answer, David," I whispered. "Can you accept who I am becoming?" He looked away, as if searching for something in the air, in the space between us. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't know if I can." His words hit me like a cold wave. I felt a sharp sting in my chest, but it was not anger. It was something deeper, something I could not name. I stood up, suddenly feeling like I needed to be somewhere else. I needed to leave the room, leave the conversation. "I cannot wait forever, David," I said quietly. "I need to know that you see me, that you are willing to see me, because if not, I cannot keep living like this." He did not say anything as I walked out of the room, but I could hear his soft sigh behind me. I walked down the hallway, into the quiet of the living room, where I sat alone in the dim light. I had asked the question. I had given him the choice. And now, I would have to wait for his answer. But in that silence, I felt something shift inside of me. For the first time in a long time, I knew I was not waiting for permission anymore. I was not waiting for someone else to decide who I should be. I was deciding for myself. The next few days were a blur. David and I barely spoke. The tension in the house grew, but it wasn't just the silence that bothered me. It was the weight of the question I had asked him, the one he had not yet answered. I spent more time alone, pacing around the house, thinking about everything we had been through, about the woman I used to be, the woman who had hidden her dreams, her voice, her true self for so long, and about the woman I was becoming, the one who was starting to break free, piece by piece. I thought about my posts, the words I shared, the quiet encouragement I had found in unexpected places. But I also thought about David's face when I asked him that question. I thought about the confusion in his eyes. I felt a deep ache in my chest. I did not want to lose him, but I could no longer ignore what was growing inside of me. This need to be seen, to be understood in a way I had never allowed myself to be before. It was a quiet pain, like a bruise no one else could see, but I could feel it deep within me. Evening, after dinner, I sat in the living room, staring out the window at the darkening sky. David sat beside me, not speaking, his presence heavy next to me. I turned to him, the question still burning in my mind, but this time I did not ask. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His gaze was softer now, but still filled with uncertainty. "I have been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice low. "I don't want to lose you, Rachel, but I don't know how to keep up with you." I nodded slowly, my heart aching at his words. "I don't need you to keep up with me," I said softly. "I just need you to see me, to see the person I am becoming, even if it scares you, even if you don't understand." He was quiet for a long time. His eyes searched mine, like he was trying to find something that had been lost. Finally, he spoke again. "I do see you, Rachel. I do. I just didn't know how to show it." I felt a lump rise in my throat. This wasn't a grand confession. It wasn't a perfect moment. But it was a beginning where he could see me, not just as his wife, but as the woman I had always been, hidden beneath all the roles I had played. "I don't want to hold you back," he said quietly. I want to learn how to stand beside you, not in your way." I smiled softly, the ache in my chest easing just a little. "I don't need you to stand beside me all the time," I said. "I just need you to be with me, to walk through this together, at whatever pace we can." It was not a perfect answer. It was not a grand resolution, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were speaking the same language. I reached for his hand, and he took it without hesitation. In that moment, I understood something. It wasn't about having all the answers or understanding everything at once. It was about being open, about being willing to grow, even if that growth felt uncertain and uncomfortable. It was about being willing to see each other, truly see each other, in the midst of all the changes. And with that, something shifted. The fog lifted, just a little, but enough for us to take a step forward. The days after our conversation felt different. David and I started to talk more, cautiously at first. But still, it was something. I could feel the change in the air. It was not dramatic, but it was there. We were both trying to find a new way of being together. But despite the small steps we took toward understanding each other, something inside of me began to shift in a way I could not ignore. I spent more time alone in my thoughts. I returned to my writing, pouring my heart out into words that seemed to capture every little detail of my emotional journey. It felt good to write again. It felt like I was finally speaking my truth. But as I sat with my thoughts, I realized something important. I had been waiting for David, waiting for him to understand me, waiting for him to see me fully. And in doing so, I had lost sight of something I could not ignore any longer. I had to see myself first. I had spent so many years being the woman everyone else needed me to be. The wife, the mother, the daughter. I had spent so much of myself in roles that were not truly me. And now, as I looked at my own reflection, I realized I could not keep waiting for someone else to define who I was. I needed to walk away, not from David, not from the life we had built, but from the version of myself I had been holding on to for far too long. It was not an easy decision. The thought of leaving behind the familiar, even for something better, was terrifying. But the fear of staying stuck in a life that did not fully reflect who I was becoming, that fear was even greater. That night, after a long day of writing, I sat down on the edge of our bed. David was in the kitchen, making a late-night cup of tea, completely unaware of the storm raging in my mind. I looked around the room, taking in the quiet. The home we had shared for so many years, the life we had built together. It felt like a world that was slowly fading, becoming more distant with each passing day. But I knew I could not stay in that world, not if I wanted to grow. Not if I wanted to truly become the person I was meant to be. I stood up and walked toward the door. I opened it softly, careful not to disturb David. I stepped into the hallway, standing in the quiet for a long moment. Then, I did something I had never done before. I walked away. Not from my marriage, not from my family, but from the part of me that had been waiting for permission to be herself. I walked away from the comfort of what I knew, toward the uncertain future that lay ahead. The days that followed felt strangely empty. I had made my decision. I had walked away, but I was not free from the weight of what that decision meant. It was not as if everything had changed overnight. The house still felt like home, even though I was no longer sure if it was the place where I truly belonged. David still moved through the rooms like a quiet presence, but I could feel the space between us growing, stretching further each day. I thought walking away would bring a sense of relief. I thought I would feel lighter, free from the burden of expectation and disappointment. But instead, I felt a deep ache, a hollow feeling in my chest that refused to go away. I spent a lot of time alone. The quiet of the house surrounded me, but it only made the pain more real. I could not escape the hurt of what I had lost, even as I stepped forward into something new. There were moments when I regretted the decision, when I wondered if I had made a mistake, when I missed the way things used to be, when I could pretend that everything was okay, that I was enough. I missed the way David used to hold me, the quiet moments when we shared everything, without words. I missed the comfort of knowing that he was there, even if we were not always on the same page. But then, there were other moments. Moments when I realized that the pain was a necessary part of the process. It was the pain of growth, the pain of shedding a skin that no longer fit. It was the pain of becoming the woman I had always been meant to be, but had never allowed myself to be before. I sat by the window one evening, watching the rain fall in soft sheets outside. The rhythm of the droplets against the glass was soothing, almost meditative. But even as I felt the calm of the moment, I could not escape the ache that lingered in my heart. I thought of David. I thought of us. And I realized something. The pain would not just go away. It was not something I could turn off with a decision or a moment of clarity. The pain was part of the journey. It was part of the cost of choosing myself. And for the first time, I understood that it was okay to feel this way. It was okay to grieve, to mourn the loss of the life I had known, while still moving forward into something unknown. I did not have all the answers. I did not know what would come next. But I knew this. The pain was mine to carry, and it was not a weakness. It was proof that I was alive, that I was still fighting for something real. I took a deep breath and let the pain settle inside of me. It was a part of me now, a part of the woman I was becoming. And that was okay. I found myself waking up in the quiet of the mornings, the silence heavier than it had ever been before. The house was still the same, but it felt different. It felt like a place I no longer fully belonged to. Like I was a visitor, trying to find my place in a world that had once been mine. Some days, I would sit by the window and watch the world outside. The trees in the yard swayed gently in the breeze, and the birds sang their songs, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. I missed the past. I missed the version of my life that was simple, familiar. I missed the days when everything seemed clear, when I could look ahead and know exactly what was coming. There was a time when David and I would sit at the kitchen table, laughing over breakfast, sharing small moments of joy. There was a time when our children were younger and their laughter filled the house, echoing through the halls like music. I missed the way our lives felt connected, like we were building something together, side by side. It was a simpler time, a time when I didn't question my place in the world, a time when I didn't question whether I was enough. But now, everything felt uncertain. I felt uncertain. The woman I was becoming, the woman I was starting to embrace, did not fit neatly into the life I had built. She was bold, unafraid to stand up and be seen. She was fierce, and she needed something more than what the past had to offer. I missed the comfort of knowing exactly where I stood, but I knew I could not go back. I could not live in that old version of myself, no matter how much I longed for the safety it represented. The past was a place of comfort, yes, but it was also a place of limitation. A place where I had hidden my dreams, my desires, my true self, behind walls I had built to protect myself from the world. I could not live in that version of the past forever. Even though it was tempting, even though I missed it more than I cared to admit. I looked at the old pictures on the walls. Family, photos, happy memories frozen in time. I remembered the days when life seemed simple, when I thought I had everything figured out. But now, I saw those memories with a new understanding. The past had shaped me, yes, but it could not define me. I could not stay trapped in what had been. I had to move forward, even if it meant letting go of some of the things I loved. I missed the past, but I also knew it was time to create something new. Something that was mine. Something that was real. It had been weeks since I had made the decision to walk away, and the silence in the house was starting to feel like a permanent companion. I had become accustomed to the emptiness, but it did not make it any easier to bear. The ache in my chest still lingered, but there were moments when I felt it shift, when I thought I might be starting to heal. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the back porch, sipping a cup of tea and staring out at the garden. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. The quiet of the evening was comforting, yet I felt a deep loneliness. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Sarah, my best friend. I hadn't talked to her in a while. Not really. I had been so consumed with my own emotions, I hadn't reached out to anyone. "Hey, are you okay? I've been thinking about you. Want to talk?" It was a simple message, but something in it made me smile. Sarah had always known how to cut through the noise and get straight to what mattered. I quickly typed back, "Yes, I would love to talk. When are you free?" She replied almost immediately. "How about now? I'll bring coffee, and you can tell me everything." It had been a while since we had sat down and just talked. Sarah and I had been through so much together. We had known each other for years, and she was the one person who could always make me feel understood, no matter what I was going through. I didn't hesitate. I needed someone to talk to. I needed to share everything that had been building up inside of me. When Sarah arrived, she was her usual lively self, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She set down the coffee and sat beside me on the porch swing. "All right," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "What's really going on? You've been quiet lately. Too quiet." I took a deep breath, trying to find the words to explain everything that had been happening. I had kept so much of it inside, but now, with Sarah, it felt like the right time to share. I walked away. I said softly, "From David. From everything. I couldn't keep pretending that I was the same person I used to be." Sarah didn't say anything right away. She just nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. It was like she could feel the weight of my words, the heaviness of what I was carrying. "You're allowed to change, Rachel," she said gently. "You're allowed to grow, even if it means leaving behind parts of your old life." I nodded, feeling the tears I had been holding back begin to rise. "I miss the past, Sarah," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I miss who I was before. All of this, before everything started to feel like it was slipping away. But I know I can't go back. I have to move forward." She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it lightly. "I know it's hard. But you are so strong, Rachel. You've been through so much, and you're still standing. You have the right to choose what's best for you. And if that means stepping away from something that no longer serves you, then that's what you need to do." Her words, simple as they were, felt like a balm on my soul. For the first time in a long time, I felt understood. It was like she had reminded me of the truth I had been forgetting, that I had the right to choose my own path, no matter how painful that choice might be. "I'm just so scared, Sarah," I whispered. "Scared of what's next. Scared of losing everything I've known." She leaned closer, her voice full of kindness. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just take it one day at a time. You don't need to know the answers right now. Just trust yourself. You'll find your way." I let out a long breath, feeling the weight of the past few months begin to loosen. Just a little. "I needed to hear that," I said, my voice softer now. She smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to smile back. In that moment, With Sarah by my side, I didn't feel so alone. And that made all the difference. Sarah had reminded me that I had the strength to keep going, even when everything seemed uncertain. But despite that reassurance, there was still one thing I needed to do. Something I had been avoiding for weeks. I needed to say goodbye to David. Not in a way that would close the door forever, but in a way that allowed me to release the past and move forward without the weight of what we once had. It was a cold morning when I finally decided to do it. The kind of morning where the air feels sharp and the world is just beginning to wake up. I had spent the night thinking, reflecting on everything that had happened, and the moment felt right. I had been avoiding this conversation for far too long. David was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked up as I entered the room, his eyes full of concern, as though he could sense what was coming. "Morning," he said softly, offering me a small smile. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady. Though I could feel my heart racing in my chest, I sat down across from him, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I need to say goodbye," I said quietly, but firmly. There's no easy way to say this, and I've been avoiding it for too long, but I think it's time for me to move on. David's face changed in an instant, his eyes widening slightly. It was as if he had known this moment would come, but hearing the words out loud made it real. He set his coffee cup down and leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "Rachel, you're not making sense. We've been trying. I thought we were working through this." "I know you have," I said, my voice softening. "But I've been doing all of the work. I've been waiting for something that isn't coming, and I can't keep waiting anymore." David didn't say anything for a moment. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the pain that he had been carrying too. But I also saw something else, an understanding, a quiet realization that, deep down, he knew this was what I needed. "I never wanted to hurt you," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to see you like this. I just didn't know how to fix it." "You couldn't fix it," I said, my voice steady now. "I couldn't fix it, because it wasn't something that needed fixing. It was something that needed to be let go of. I need to let go of this version of us." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle in the space between us. "I'm not saying goodbye to you, David. I'm saying goodbye to the life we built together, the life I thought we would always have. I'm saying goodbye to the woman I used to be, and I'm choosing to move forward." There was a long silence. David looked down at his hands, and I could see the tears that were threatening to fall. I knew this wasn't easy for him, but I also knew it was something that needed to be done. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry too," I replied, "and I'm grateful for the time we had, but I can't keep holding on to something that isn't meant for me anymore." I stood up, taking one last look at him before turning to leave the room. There was no dramatic moment, no final kiss or embrace. There was just the quiet reality of two people who had loved each other, but had grown in different directions. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It was as if I had just taken the first step into a new life, one that was mine to shape, mine to live. It wasn't easy, it wasn't without pain, but it was necessary. And in that moment, I knew it was the right decision. It had been a week since I said goodbye to David. I never imagined that it would feel this way, alone. Not lonely exactly, but alone in a way that was unfamiliar. For the first time in years, there were no shared routines, no conversations at the dinner table, no quiet moments together in the evening. There was just silence, the kind that fills every corner of the house, leaving nothing untouched. The first few days were the hardest. I spent them in a daze, moving through the motions but not really feeling present in my own life. I cleaned, I cooked, I watched TV, but there was no real sense of purpose. I kept waiting for something to shift, for some sign that this was the right decision, but nothing came. It was just me, alone with my thoughts. The house felt so big, so empty. Even the little things reminded me of the life I had left behind. The pictures on the walls, the books on the shelves. They were all memories of a time when I wasn't by myself, when there was someone to share the quiet moments with, someone who knew all the little details of my day, someone who understood me in a way that no one else could. I missed the comfort of having someone to talk to, someone who knew exactly how I liked my coffee, or how I hated doing the dishes but always ended up doing them anyway. I miss those little things, the ones that made life feel familiar and safe. But at the same time, I knew that I could not go back. The choice had been made. And while the silence was loud and heavy, it was also an opportunity for something new. Something I had never allowed myself to experience before. I spent more time by myself, in the quiet of the mornings, sipping my coffee alone at the table. There was a strange kind of peace in it, a peace that came from knowing I was not waiting for anyone to join me. I was not depending on anyone to fill the space or provide the comfort I had once needed. In the evenings, I would sit in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The house felt still, but it also felt like mine in a way it never had before. It was empty, yes, but it was empty of the weight of expectations, the weight of pretending. It was just me. I began to realize that being alone did not mean being lost. It did not mean being broken or incomplete. I was learning that I could stand on my own, that I could be whole, even when I was by myself. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, moments when I longed for the companionship I had lost. But slowly, those moments grew fewer. In their place, I found a quiet strength, a strength that came from knowing I had the power to move forward. Even in the silence, I was alone. Yes, but I was not empty. I was simply waiting for the next chapter of my life to unfold. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. The days of solitude had slowly given me something I had not expected: clarity. I had spent so many years defining myself through the eyes of others, as a wife, a mother, a friend. But now I was learning how to define myself by my own standards. I was discovering who I truly was, without the weight of anyone else's expectations pressing down on me. The woman I had been before, the woman who stayed in the background, kept quiet, and held everything together for everyone else. She was still a part of me, but she no longer defined me. That version of myself had been shaped by fear and doubt, by the belief that my worth came from how well I could keep the peace, how much I could give to others, how little I allowed myself to ask for. But now, I could feel something different inside me. Something stronger. Something that had been buried deep for years, but was finally starting to emerge. I was no longer afraid of stepping into the light. I was no longer afraid to take up space in the world. I was learning to speak my truth, even when it felt uncomfortable. I was learning that I had a voice that mattered. There were moments when I doubted myself, moments when the fear of being alone crept back in, whispering that maybe I wasn't enough, that I couldn't handle the challenges ahead. But each time that doubt surfaced, I reminded myself of how far I had come. I reminded myself that I had already walked through the hardest part, the part where I made the decision to choose myself, to walk away from the life I thought I would always have. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't sure of everything. But I was learning to trust myself in a way I never had before. The reflection I saw in the mirror each morning was different. The woman looking back at me was no longer the one who had lived in the shadows. She was someone who had faced her fears, who had survived the pain, and who was still standing. I was not the same person I had been when this journey started. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more confident in my own worth. The woman I was becoming was someone who could hold her head high, who could walk into any room and know that she had earned her place there. And though I still carried the scars of the past, they were not signs of weakness. They were signs of resilience. They were reminders that I had survived, and that I was capable of facing whatever came next. I was not the same. And that was something I was beginning to embrace. It was a rainy afternoon when I first noticed it. The smallest flicker of light. It wasn't much, just a brief moment of warmth in the midst of the cold, but it was enough to catch my attention. I had been sitting by the window, staring out at the gray sky, feeling the heaviness of the world around me. The rain had been falling for days, a constant reminder of the emotional storm I had been weathering. Everything felt so still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. And then, in the quiet of the afternoon, I saw it. A small bird, fluttering outside the window, hopping from branch to branch on a tree. At first, I thought nothing of it. But as I watched the little creature, I felt something shift inside me. It was so small, so fragile, yet so full of life. It moved with purpose, with hope, even in the face of the storm. It seemed to say, without words, that life goes on, even when things are difficult, even when everything seems dark. I sat there for a long time, watching the bird, feeling the tiniest spark of hope begin to grow in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was light after all. Maybe, even in the darkest times, there were moments of beauty and peace, moments that reminded me that I was still alive, still capable of moving forward. The rain continued to fall, but the world felt a little different now. The heaviness had lifted, if only for a moment. The small bird had shown me that there was always something worth holding on to, even if it was just a flicker of light. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months begin to shift. I was still healing. I was still finding my way. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to look ahead, ready to embrace whatever came next. It was not the end of my journey, but it was a sign that I was moving in the right direction. And that small light, that tiny spark of hope, was all I needed to remind me that I was not alone, that I was strong enough to face the future, no matter how uncertain it might seem. The first few weeks after I said goodbye to David felt like walking through fog. I was no longer trapped in the past, but I wasn't yet fully in the future either. Everything was still unfamiliar. Everything felt new and uncertain, as though I was waking up from a long dream and stepping into a world I didn't recognize. But slowly, I began to find my footing. I started waking up earlier. not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took long walks around the neighborhood, breathing in the fresh air and letting the world around me remind me that I was alive, that there was so much more to see. Started cooking meals for myself, not just out of necessity, but because I enjoyed it. I learned to savor the quiet moments, to appreciate the simple things I had always taken for granted. I took up new hobbies, things I had put on hold for years. I started reading again, the way I had when I was younger, when the world felt full of possibility. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of routines, responsibilities, and emotional weight. But the most important change was that I started taking care of myself. I had always been the one who took care of everyone else. I had always been the one who put others first, who made sure everyone else was okay before I even considered my own needs. But now, for the first time in my life, I was putting myself at the top of the list. I was learning to be kind to myself, to be patient with my own healing process. I started journaling again, writing down my thoughts, my hopes, my fears. I wrote about the small moments that brought me joy, the little victories that reminded me I was stronger than I realized. I wrote about the future I was beginning to imagine for myself. A future where I was no longer defined by my relationships or my past, but by who I truly was. One afternoon, I went to a local cafe and sat down with a cup of tea. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. I had spent so many years taking care of others that I had forgotten how to simply be with myself. But now, as I sat in that cafe, sipping my tea and watching the world go by, I realized something important. I was okay. I was more than okay. I was beginning again, and it felt like freedom. The past was still with me, but it no longer had control over me. I was moving forward, slowly but surely, one step at a time. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I was learning to embrace it, to trust that everything I needed was already inside me. I was not the same woman I had been, but that was okay, because I was learning to be someone new, someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who was finally beginning to live for herself. And with that realization, I felt a quiet peace settle in my heart. I had started again, and that was enough. It had been a few months since I had made the decision to walk away from David. The silence between us had stretched long, and I had finally settled into a life that was entirely my own. I had found comfort in the small routines, in the quiet, moments that used to feel so heavy. I was learning to live for myself, and though there were days when the past would creep into my thoughts, I was learning to let go. But then, one evening, my phone rang. I was in the middle of cooking dinner, the kitchen filled with the smells of garlic and rosemary, when I saw his name on the screen. David. I froze. The room seemed to go still around me, the sound of the boiling water on the stove suddenly too loud. I hadn't heard from him in months, and for a moment I simply stared at the phone in my hand, unsure of what to do. I had imagined this moment in my mind countless times. I had imagined the exact words he would say when he called, how he would beg for another chance, how he would tell me that he had changed. I had prepared myself for this, or so I thought. But now, in this moment, everything seemed different. The phone continued to ring, and my heart beat faster in my chest. I could feel the pull of the past, the part of me that wanted to pick up and hear his voice, the part of me that wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had changed. But then I reminded myself of everything I had learned. I reminded myself of the strength I had found in walking away, of the peace I had found in choosing myself. I let it ring, allowing the sound to fill the space between us. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of that decision, the weight of knowing that I had made the right choice. But the next day he called again. And the day after that. And the day after that. I could no longer ignore it. I could no longer pretend that I hadn't heard his calls. So, after much hesitation, I picked up the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady but soft. "Rachel?" David's voice came through the phone, and I could hear the familiar warmth in his tone, the same warmth that had once drawn me to him. "Hi. I've been thinking about you a lot. I know it's been a while, but I really need to talk." I closed my eyes, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. "David," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not sure what you want from me. I've moved on. I'm not the same person I was when we were together." "I know," he said quickly. "But I need you to know that I've changed. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, and I realize now what I lost. I realize that I took you for granted, and I am so sorry for that." I felt the familiar pang of old emotions rising, but I pushed them back. "I don't know what you want me to say," I replied. "I've moved on, David. I can't go back to what we had." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "I understand. But I need you to know that I still care about you. I still love you. I know I messed up and I know I hurt you, but I was hoping that we could talk about it. Maybe we could start over." My chest tightened as I heard his words. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to say yes, to give us a second chance, to give him the benefit of the doubt. But the woman I had become knew that going back to him would be a mistake. I had already given so much of myself to that relationship, and I could feel, deep down, that I had nothing left to give. "David," I said, my voice steady, "I appreciate that you are reaching out, but I've made my decision. I am not the same person I was when we were together. I have changed, and I cannot go back to what we had." I could hear the hurt in his voice, but I stood firm. "I'm sorry. I think it's best if we both move forward. I'm already moving forward, and I need to keep going." There was a long silence, and then he spoke, his voice quiet. "Okay, I understand. I wanted you to know how I feel." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "I know. And I hope you find what you are looking for, David, but it's time for us to let go." I ended the call, my hand still holding the phone, as I let out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. It was done. The door had been closed, and I felt something inside me shift. It was no longer about what had been. It was about what was yet to come. After David's call, there was a lingering silence in my life, a space that had once been filled with uncertainty, longing, and old hopes. But now, that silence felt different. It was not an absence. It was a space I had learned to fill on my own, with my own thoughts, my own dreams, my own peace. I had spent so much of my life living for someone else's approval, trying to please others, trying to make sure everyone around me was happy. But now, as I stood in the quiet of my own home, I realized something important. I no longer needed anyone else to define me. The old version of myself, the woman who was always putting others first, the one who stayed in the background, the one who accepted less than she deserved. That woman was gone. She had been replaced by someone stronger, more self-assured, someone who had learned to walk away from things that no longer served her, from people who did not honor her worth. I had never known how to say no. I had never known how to set boundaries, to protect myself from the hurt that others brought into my life. But now, I was learning how to stand firm. I was learning that my peace, my happiness, and my well-being were just as important as anyone else's. And if someone could not respect that, then they had no place in my life. It was not easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the fear of being alone threatened to pull me back into old patterns. I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I was being too unforgiving. But then I would remind myself of everything I had been through. The pain, the heartache, the betrayals. And I would realize that I had earned the right to protect my heart. I had learned the hard way that I could not change anyone else. I could not fix what was broken in others, no matter how much I loved them or how hard I tried. The only person I could change was myself, and the only person I needed to protect was me. It was a difficult lesson, but it was one that had made me stronger. I was no longer afraid to speak my truth, to stand up for myself, to walk away when I needed to. I was no longer afraid to choose myself, even if it meant disappointing others, even if it meant standing alone. And in the quiet moments, I began to realize just how much I had changed. The woman who once lived in fear, in uncertainty, was gone. The woman who had always tried to please others, who had given up her own happiness for the sake of others, was no longer the same. I was different now. I had found my voice. I had learned to trust myself. I had learned to listen to my own needs and desires, to honor them the way I had once honored everyone else's. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, and it felt like freedom. I had finally come to understand that the only approval I needed was my own, and the only love I needed to seek was the love I had for myself. I was not the same person I had been, and that was the most beautiful thing of all. It was a quiet morning, when I realized something profound. I had spent so much of my life trying to live up to everyone else's expectations, trying to meet the needs of others before my own, that I had completely forgotten what it meant to choose myself. For the longest time, I believed that my worth was tied to the people I loved, to the roles I played in their lives. I thought that being needed by others was what gave me value. But now, as I sat with my cup of tea in the stillness of my kitchen, I realized how wrong I had been. I didn't need anyone else's validation to feel complete. I didn't need to bend myself in every direction to make others happy. I didn't need to stay in situations or relationships that drained me, just because I was afraid of disappointing someone. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to truly choose myself. It wasn't a selfish act. It was a powerful one. It was an act of self-love, self-respect, and self-preservation. I had spent so many years putting others first, caring for their needs, and neglecting my own. I had stayed in relationships that weren't healthy, tolerated behaviors that were not acceptable, simply because I didn't want to face the discomfort of standing up for myself. But now, I was ready to change that. I was ready to put myself at the center of my life. I was ready to set boundaries, to say no when I needed to stand firm in my truth, no matter who it upset. Choosing myself didn't mean that I stopped caring about others. It didn't mean that I became cold or indifferent. It meant that I stopped giving away pieces of myself until there was nothing left to give. It meant that I stopped apologizing for needing space, for needing time, for needing to take care of myself. It meant that I started honoring my own needs, my own dreams, my own desires. It meant that I began to believe in my own worth, independent of anyone else's approval or acceptance. I remember the first time I said no to something I didn't want to do. It felt like a small victory, but it was one of the most empowering moments of my life. I had always feared disappointing people, so I had spent years saying yes to things that didn't serve me, to things that made me feel small. But that day, I chose to say no. And for the first time, it felt good. It felt like I was taking back control of my own life. I chose to spend my weekends doing things that brought me joy, whether it was taking a walk, reading a book, or simply resting. I stopped apologizing for needing time to myself, and I stopped feeling guilty for not always being available to everyone else. I chose to take care of my body, to nourish it with healthy food, to move it in ways that felt good, to give it the rest it deserved. But choosing myself wasn't just about self-care. It was about making decisions that aligned with who I truly was, not who others wanted me to be. It was about trusting my instincts, speaking my truth, and stepping into my own power. I knew there would be challenges ahead. There would be people who didn't understand, people who didn't like the new version of me. But I also knew that I was no longer afraid of that. I had spent far too long trying to please everyone, trying to fit into roles that weren't mine. Now, I was ready to live for myself, to be unapologetically me. Choosing myself didn't mean I was perfect. It didn't mean I had all the answers, or that I would never make mistakes. But it meant that I was finally putting myself first, and that made all the difference. I had spent so many years giving pieces of myself away, hoping that it would make me feel whole. But now I understood that I was already whole. I didn't need to rely on others to complete me. I had everything I needed within myself. And that was the most powerful choice I could ever make. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm golden light across the room. I stood by the window, watching the soft light spread across the trees outside, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. It was not the kind of peace that comes from silence, from things being okay. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of peace that comes from knowing who you are, from accepting yourself, from having the strength to face whatever life throws your way. For so long, I had been waiting for the world to change, for the people around me to change, for my circumstances to improve. But now, I understood that the only thing I could change was myself. The only thing I could control was how I responded to the world. That realization was both freeing and daunting. It meant that I was no longer a victim of my past, no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was not the sum of my mistakes, my heartbreaks, or the people who had hurt me. I was the sum of my choices, and I was ready to make new ones. I took a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill my lungs. A new day had begun, and with it came a new chapter of my life. One where I could write my own story, where I could choose what my future looked like. I no longer needed permission from anyone else to live the life I wanted. I no longer needed validation or approval. I had given that to myself. It was a simple moment, standing by the window, watching the light fill the room. But it felt profound. It felt like a turning point. The moment when everything shifted, when I finally stopped waiting for something outside of me to change and began to change from within. I could hear the birds singing outside, a reminder that life continued, that the world kept turning no matter what had happened in the past. And in that moment, I realized that I, too, was part of that flow. I was no longer stuck in the past. I was no longer waiting for something to happen. I was finally living in the present, fully aware of my worth, fully aware of the power I held. Within me, it was a peaceful kind of power, a quiet strength, and it was mine. I smiled to myself as I turned away from the window, ready to begin my day. Not because I had forgotten everything that had happened, not because I had erased the pain or the heartache, but because I had learned to embrace it. I had learned to carry it with me, to let it shape me without letting it control me. Today I was going to live for me, and tomorrow I would do the same. And that was enough. The days passed by in a gentle rhythm, and I found myself looking back more often than I expected. Not with regret, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength I had found within myself, for the moments that had shaped me into the woman I had become. I had spent so many years focused on the things I did not have, the things I had lost. I had cried over the dreams that slipped away, the relationships that had ended, the opportunities that I thought had passed me by. But now, I was starting to see it all differently. I was starting to realize that everything I had experienced, both the joy and the pain, had led me to this moment of peace, of self-acceptance, of knowing who I was and what I was capable of. And so I began to say thank you. Not just to the people who had supported me, not just to the moments of happiness, but to the pain as well. Because the pain had taught me resilience. It had shown me my own strength, my own capacity to heal. It had shown me that even when things seemed impossible, I had the power to rise again. I sat down one afternoon with a cup of tea, the warmth of it in my hands bringing a sense of calm. I pulled out my journal, the pages now filled with reflections, with stories, with words I had once been afraid to write. And I began to write letters, not to anyone in particular, but to everything and everyone that had shaped my journey. To the heartbreaks. Thank you for teaching me that my worth is not determined by anyone else's love. Thank you for showing me that I can be whole on my own. To the people who had hurt me. Thank you for teaching me to set boundaries, to protect my heart, and to never settle for less than I deserve. To the moments of loneliness. Thank you for teaching me that solitude is not something to fear, but something to embrace. Thank you for showing me how to be my own company. To the quiet mornings, the gentle sunrises, the moments of peace. Thank you for reminding me that beauty exists in the simplest of things, in the quiet stillness of the world. And to myself, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for finding your voice, for choosing yourself, for loving yourself enough to let go of what no longer served you. I folded each letter, and placed it in a small box, a symbol of my journey, of the lessons I had learned, and the person I had become. Saying thank you was not about excusing the pain or pretending that everything had been easy. It was about acknowledging that every part of my story had value. Every moment, every challenge, every heartbreak had shaped me into who I was today. And for that, I was grateful. As I placed the final letter in the box, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. It was as though I had closed a chapter in the most beautiful way possible, not with bitterness or anger, but with acceptance and gratitude. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood the power of saying thank you. It was not just a gesture of politeness. It was a way of freeing myself, of letting go of the past and embracing the future with open arms. And so, as I closed the box, I said one final thank you to myself. Thank you for choosing to be happy, for choosing to be free, and for choosing to be the woman you were always meant to be. It had been a long journey, one filled with pain, self-doubt, and lessons learned the hard way. But there was one thing I had yet to truly do: forgive myself. For so long, I had carried the weight of guilt, the weight of mistakes, and the weight of things I could not change. It was as though I had convinced myself that I was not worthy of peace unless I paid for my past mistakes. But today, I was ready to set that weight down. I sat quietly on the edge of my bed, the soft light of the evening spilling in through the window. The house was still, and for the first time in a long while, so was my mind. I thought about the things I had done, the choices I had made, and the people I had hurt along the way. I thought about the times I had stayed in relationships that drained me, the times I had been afraid to speak my truth, the times I had silenced my own needs for the sake of others. I had always told myself that I was doing my best, that I was only human, that I could not have known how things would turn out. But still, the guilt lingered. I had spent years punishing myself for things I could not change. I had believed that if I just worked harder, if I just tried more, if I just gave more, I could fix everything. But now, I understood. I understood that no matter how hard I tried, I could not change the past. I could not undo my mistakes. I could not make up for every choice I regretted. What I could do, however, was forgive myself. I could let go of the guilt that had held me captive for so long. Forgiveness did not mean that I excused my actions or erased the consequences of my choices. It meant that I stopped holding myself prisoner to the past. It meant that I accepted that I had done the best I could with the knowledge and resources I had at the time. It meant that I allowed myself the grace to move forward, to learn from my mistakes, and to grow. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. And in that quiet moment, I said the words I had needed to say for so long. I forgive you. I said it to the woman who had been afraid, to the woman who had stayed in places that no longer served her, to the woman who had been too hard on herself. I forgive you, I whispered again. And this time, it felt different. It felt like a release, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I thought about all the times I had felt unworthy, all the times I had believed I wasn't good enough. But now, I realized that those beliefs were not the truth. I was worthy of love. I was worthy of peace. I was worthy of forgiveness, even from myself. It was not easy. It was not instant. But I could feel something shift within me, a shift that came with the simple act of forgiving myself. It was as though I was finally free from the prison I had built around my heart. A prison made of guilt, shame, and self-blame. I stood up and walked to the mirror, looking at my reflection with new eyes. I saw a woman who had been through the fire and had come out stronger on the other side. I saw a woman who had made mistakes, but who had also learned and grown from them. I saw a woman who was worthy of her own love and compassion. And as I stood there, gazing into my own eyes, I said it one last time, I forgive you. This time, it felt like a promise to myself that I would no longer carry the weight of my past mistakes, a promise that I would treat myself with the same kindness and understanding that I offered to others. Forgiving myself was not about forgetting. It was about healing. It was about accepting my imperfections and allowing myself to move forward with a heart that was open and free. And in that moment, I knew that I was finally ready to live fully, without the burden of guilt holding me back. I was ready to embrace the future, to take the lessons of the past with me, and to move forward with grace and love. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke up without a heavy heart. I could not remember the last time I had felt so light, so free. It was as if a part of me had been locked away for years, and now the door had finally opened. I no longer felt trapped by the weight of past mistakes, by the expectations of others, by the fears that had once held me captive. I stepped out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond. The sky was clear, the sun was rising, and everything seemed full of possibility. It was a new day, and with it came the promise of something beautiful, a future that was entirely mine to shape. I had spent so many years worrying about what others thought of me, about whether I was doing enough, about whether I was living up to the expectations placed upon me. But now, all of that felt distant. I realized that the only opinion that mattered was my own. The only person whose approval I needed was myself. I took a deep breath and smiled, feeling the freedom of that truth wash over me. I was no longer bound by the need to please others, to seek their validation, to be what they wanted me to be. I was free to be me, the woman I had always been beneath the layers of fear and doubt. The past no longer had a hold on me. The mistakes I had made, the regrets I had carried no longer defined me. I had learned, I had grown, and I had forgiven myself. And now, I could walk forward with my head held high, unburdened by the past. I thought about all the things I had once thought I could not do, all the dreams I had put on hold, all the things I had convinced myself were out of reach. But now, I knew better. There was nothing standing in my way but my own fears, and I was ready to face them. I put on my favorite dress, the one that always made me feel confident and alive, and I went outside for a walk. The world felt different, somehow. It was the same world I had always known, but I saw it with new eyes. I noticed the beauty in the smallest things, the way the sunlight danced on the leaves, the sound of birds singing in the distance, the smell of fresh air. I felt connected to everything around me, and for the first time I truly understood what it meant to be free. It was not about escaping from something. It was about embracing who I was, exactly as I was. It was about letting go of the things that no longer served me, and opening myself up to the possibility of something new. Could feel a shift within me, like a quiet confidence that had been waiting to emerge. I no longer felt the need to prove myself to anyone. I no longer felt the need to fit into any mold or live up to anyone else's expectations. I was finally living for myself, and that made all the difference. As I walked through the neighborhood, I noticed a couple of familiar faces. Old friends, neighbors who had watched me grow over the years. And for the first time, I saw them with new eyes as well. I no longer felt the need to hide or apologize for who I was. I simply smiled, knowing that I had nothing to prove. I was free. Free from the burden of guilt. Free from the weight of others' expectations. Free from the fear of judgment. I was free to live my life on my own terms, to make choices that felt right for me, to embrace my own power. And in that freedom, I found peace. True, lasting peace. There was a time when I was unsure of who I was, a time when I let the opinions of others define me, when I allowed their judgments to shape the way I saw myself. I was a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, all roles I played for others. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the woman beneath those roles. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what it meant to just be me. Now, I could say with certainty that I knew exactly who I was. I was no longer a reflection of other people's expectations. I was no longer a sum of my mistakes or my regrets. I was not just the parts of myself that others saw. I was everything that I had learned to embrace, everything I had come to understand, everything I had forgiven. Standing in front of the mirror, I looked at myself, really looked at myself. For the first time in a long time, I saw the lines on my face, the gray in my hair, the softening of my body, and I realized that every change, every mark, every shift was a part of who I was. Each moment, each experience had left its trace on me, and all of it, the joy and the pain, the growth and the struggle, was mine, and I was proud of it. I had spent so many years trying to be what I thought others wanted me to be. I had tried to live up to their standards, to fit into their boxes, to please them. But now, I no longer cared about fitting into anyone's mold. I was no longer afraid to take up space, to stand tall, to speak my truth. I had learned that the only approval I needed was my own, and I had given it to myself. I smiled at the reflection in the mirror, not because I thought I was perfect, but because I knew I was whole. I had embraced the imperfections, the scars, the stories that had made me who I was, and I was proud of the woman who looked back at me. I was proud of the strength I had found within myself, proud of the courage I had shown in the face of adversity. No longer needed anyone else to tell me who I was. I had found that answer for myself. It was strange, this feeling of certainty. For so long, I had questioned everything about myself, my choices, my worth, my place in the world. But now, I knew. I knew that I was enough, just as I was. I knew that I had value, that I had purpose, that I had something to offer this world. I knew that my story, with all its twists and turns, had meaning. And most importantly, I knew that I was deserving of all the love and peace I had worked so hard to find. Not because I was perfect, but because I was real. There was no longer any doubt in my heart. I knew who I was, and I was finally at peace with that truth. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything I have been through, I want to share something with you. I want to leave you with a message that comes from the heart of everything I have learned. Life is not always easy. There are moments when it feels like the world is too heavy, when the pain seems too much to bear. There are times when we question ourselves, when we doubt our worth, when we wonder if we will ever be able to heal. But I am here to tell you that you are stronger than you think. I am here to tell you that no matter what you have faced, no matter what you have lost, you can rise, you can heal, and you can become the person you were always meant to be. I know because I have walked that path. I have known the sting of betrayal, the weight of guilt, the ache of loneliness. But I have also known the power of forgiveness, the freedom of letting go, and the peace that comes with accepting who I am. So, if you are struggling right now, if you feel lost or uncertain or broken, I want you to know that it is okay. It is okay to feel pain. It is okay to cry. It is okay to take your time. But please remember, you are not alone. You are not defined by your mistakes or your past. You are defined by your courage to keep going, to keep loving, to keep growing. You have everything you need within you. You have strength. You have resilience. You have the ability to heal and to create a future that is full of peace and possibility. And you are worthy of all the good things that life has to offer. You are worthy of love, of happiness, of everything that makes you feel alive. I have learned that it is not the hard times that define us, but how we rise from them. It is the way we choose to face our fears, to forgive ourselves, to embrace our flaws, and to move forward with grace. So wherever you are in your journey, I want you to know that you are enough. You are enough, just as you are. And you have the power to shape your own story. A story filled with strength, love, and hope. Thank you for listening to mine. And thank you for allowing me to share this part of my heart with you. Remember, you are not alone, and you are capable of amazing things. And with that, Rachel's story concludes, but her message remains. We are all capable of healing, of growth, and of finding the strength to live authentically and fully.